Well, boys and girls, we're going to go over my Stam Sorc build today. We're going to discuss the gear and then we'll go through the skills, and then I'll explain kind of why we're using the gear and how it all kind of gets put together and gets used in Cyrodiil. So let's get straight into it. We're running 2-piece bollards. Now we're in all medium. If you would like to run 2 heavy, that's perfectly fine and up to you, but we're in 7 medium. There's still a few traits that aren't perfect yet. I haven't had transmutes, but yeah, we're in 2 bollards. This is well fitted. This will be well fitted when I can transmute it. We're running all large, all triglyphs on our large pieces, and we're running a 5-piece Deadlands on our body as well as our jewelry. We're running 2 infused rings and a swift necklace. These will obviously be gold when I can afford it. And we've got some max health enchants on some of the smaller pieces and max stam on the others. And we actually have a max health here, so we're not running triglyphs and all. That was my bad. But the plan will be to run 5 well fitted and 2 in pen. So that will be the end game plan here. I just don't have all the pieces I need. And this Swift piece is kind of up to you. I do recommend running a Swift, even 2 if you really want. And I'll explain a little bit more later on. Then we're running that mole front bar. Now this could be a sword as well. It's completely up to you. And this will be sharpened as well when I have a transmutes to transmute it. And then on the rest of the gear we're running is Armor Master on our back bar. So pretty self-explanatory, and the Deadlands, for those that don't know, basically is weapon damage, max stam, and then the 5-piece gives you 200 weapon damage, and also when you deal damage with a heavy attack, you're basically dealing physical damage to everyone in front of you, and also, if they're below 50% health, you also do bleed damage over 13 seconds. So, for those that kind of understand the game, you can see what we're doing here, combining our that, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, that's the gear, guys. Alright, so our skills. Now, then we're running Resolving Vigor. This is about 27-28k when we're fully buffed, so it's a nice juicy heal. Dark Deal for our sustain. This, for those that don't know, converts magic into stamina and also gives you a nice heal in the process. It does have a cast time, so this is, used after a bowl. Generally, you'll get some distance, or get some line of sight, and then you'll be able to get a Dark Deal off. It can be interrupted too, so keep that in mind. It's only a 1-second cast time, but 1 second's 1 second. Then we're running Hurricane. This is our armor buff and also an AoE dot, which is really handy for the next skill that we're using, and Crit Surge. So something about Crit Surge is we're running crit pots, so our crit's not too bad. It's about 30%, 31%. If you don't want to run crit pots, then I wouldn't use this. I'd swap it out for something else, because 30% is kind of the lower limit of what you want to be able to get this heal every second. But what I've found with just Hurricane, having a couple people on me, at 30%, I can kind of get this to proc every second. Then you add everything else into, all your other damage into it, and you're basically proccing this off cooldown every second, basically. And then we're running Spell Wall. We were running Undo from the Sigic skill line. It also gives you minor protection, which is really nice. But it seems to be buggier than ever this patch, and especially the way that block bug is really causing issues for people. Spell Wall seems to be really good, but that's completely up to you. If you want to run Undo here, then you completely and utterly can. Then on our front bar, we're running Bowl. So some may wonder, 1, why this is on a front bar, and 2, why we're not running Streak. It's on our front bar primarily for when we go offense, and then say we get popped really hard, we can bowl, and then, you know, we've got a few seconds to get ourselves, you know, sorted out and get ourselves back into a fighting situation. So that's why bowls bowl, and that's why it's on our front bar. So then we're running Rally. This is a really good heal. Not much else to really say about this. Obviously, it increases its heal over the time, so if you leave it longer, it's a strong heal, and also gives us minor endurance, which is really nice, 15% stamina recovery. Then we got Crystal Weapon. This is kind of the third piece of the puzzle to this build, and one of the reasons why this build is as strong as what it is, and we'll get into that in more detail later on. Then we're running D-Swing, so obviously besides being spammable, this is kind of how we're going to get our stun, so we're going to set off balance on this, and then we are going to heavy attack them to CC them. Then we're running Execute, not much to say about that, that's our Execute, and then we're running Dawnbreaker. This is what's going to kind of give us that burst damage. It's also really handy sometimes in a defense way. You can pop it and get a stun on, you know, everyone in front of you. So that's the skills, guys. We'll get into some of the other little finer details of the build, and then we'll discuss how this kind of all works for those that haven't already worked out what's going on. Running the Serpent, so this is stamina recovery. You can quite easily run weapon damage or penetration and all that if you want. I just find with my sustain, being Aussie, it's sometimes a bit hard to get reliable heavy attacks off, so having a bit extra sustain built in is really nice, but you could quite easily swap this out for penetration or weapon damage or whatever it may be. Then we're running Beat with Sugar Skulls. You obviously don't need to do this, you can run a normal tri-stat, but I've got heaps of left over from last patch, so we are using that. And our attributes is 10 into health and 54 into stamina. This is just to get our hit pool back up around 30k. And then we're a bit higher than that with well and some of the other buffs. Okay, so let's talk about the stats on this build. We're running pretty low magic recovery, but it seems to be enough to get enough dark deals off and a bowl here and there. You definitely won't be spamming bowl on this build, but it's enough to you know, get yourself out of a situation. And our stam sustain's pretty good, so you know it's enough for the dark deal here and there we need. Health recovery, as we know, is basically non-existent this patch, so we've only got 500, and then we're sitting at 1600 stam recovery. Keep in mind this is with resource buff, so just keep that in mind. And then we're running anywhere between about the low 7s and the high 7s, basically, as far as weapon damage goes. Fully buffed, we're in the upper end of the 7Ks, so with a juicy bollards, we're, you know, up in that high 7K area, and then you know, not fully buffed, we're down in the lower 7 area. And then our weapon critical is 30%, which isn't too bad. And then we've got our resists. Our resists are around 29k, almost 30k with our armor master buff. So on the stat sheet there, that's without our armor buff and without our armor master buff as well. So basically add about 11k, almost 12k onto that stat sheet there, and that will give you our resistances. And then we are at 1800 crit resist, which is a bit low. We are going to run one more crit piece, so that will give us almost 2k. And then as far as max stats, we're at 18k max magic, and almost 32k health, and almost 27k stam. I think we are just over that. I think we are 27 something on our front bar. So they're the stats, pretty good. Decent damage, decent survivability, decent sustain. There's not much else really to say about them. Let's move on. the CP section, we are running both the healing CP, so increased healing done with healing over time, and we're also running increased healing done with single target. Healing just seems to be really important this patch, just because the way damage is, and stacking mitigation only gets you so far. And then we're running increased damage done with single target attacks, and then we are also running reduced damage taken by single target attacks. Now, I'm thinking about swapping this out for the heavy attack one, and we'll be playing around with that, so that's something to keep in mind. Then we're running, while under the effects of crowd control immunity, you take 2% less damage, so 10%. The way that CC break is at the moment, this is kind of really important. And then, while affected by status effects, your core combat skills cost 25% less. This is a sustained monster. It's really handy, especially with the way that block is. And the chances of you being affected by a status effect in Cyrodiil is pretty damn high. So, and then we are running the automatic CC break. I normally don't run this, but just the way that break free is at the moment, and this seems to be more consistent with instant CC breaking than what the game will allow you to break. And then we're just running max health. You could run something else here. It's just my hit pool was a bit low. And yeah, that's the CP. That's most of the gear and everything you need to know. We'll go into a quick explanation of why we're running the gear we're running and all that for those that kind of haven't worked out why we're running what we're running. Okay, so let's talk about how your rotations are going to look and how the build all kind of comes together. So something to keep in mind is Elude is what procs your Armor Master. So even though it's every 33 seconds, you're going to want to recast it, you want to keep it up every 10, so you keep that Armor Master buff up. So getting a tracker for that is really handy. Obviously, needless to say, keeping Vigor up all the time is really important, and and Rally, like having these two up all the time is really important. I'm still pretty sloppy at the moment. I'm still getting used to Stam Sorc in general, but needless to say, these are things that you should get used to. And same with Crit Surge. Crit Surge is something that you want up all the time, and same with Bounce. Then Dark Deals you sustain, so you know you're going to use this when you start to get low on stamina. Ideally, you want to do this when you're, not out of stamina, just when you're starting to get low. Around 25% generally is a good spot. And a good habit to get in is get some distance, or do a bowl, or get some line of sight before you do this, because it can be interruptible. And even though you get a heal from it, it's not really going to save you if you're in the open and you're getting smashed by a heap of people. So keep that in mind. So let's talk about the main defense. As I talked about when we talked about the skills, our ball's on our front bar, so when we're going offense heavily and we get pressured, we can ball, and we can get our heals back up if they're down, and we can get a dark deal off and all that kind of stuff. So our offensive rotation can go a few different ways, but primarily it's fundamentally the same. You're going to want to get that proc, so apparently that isn't working. Sometimes it gets a bit picky when you're not in combat. So you'll want to get your that proc, and then you're going to hit your crystallized, you're going to go D-swing, and then heavy. As you can see, our heavy just smacked super hard. If you're an Aussie, something to keep in mind, this can be a little bit tricky when it gets laggy, and sometimes you might want to go D-swing, then crystallized, then heavy. But generally, if the server's performing somewhat okay, then you can go crystallized, D-swing, heavy. So as I said, there's a couple ways this can go. Now, generally, I'll go that into into Dawnbreaker and then into Executioner. But obviously we're running Bollards, so you know, after our ult we're going to have a whole lot of damage, and also our Deadlands does extra damage when they're low. So if you're fighting someone that's a bit more tankier, you might actually go Dawnbreaker first. So you might drop your Dawnbreaker, then go Crystallize, and then your Heavy. I should have done this in Cyrodiil. It's very laggy in here. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. So we've got our Crystallized, our that two-hander, and then our Deadlands all hitting at the same time. My food's down as well. Lol. But yeah, so that's kind of how this build functions and all comes together. You know, we're all stacking around a heavy attack and that burst that we're going to get from our heavy attack. So, if you have any questions or you don't quite understand what's going on with this build, feel free to join one of my streams. I stream most days. I'll leave a description in the a link in the description. And yeah, feel free to come and ask as many questions as you need. And, you know, if you want to try some different things and you're not sure if it may work, then feel free to. And, you know, if you just have any general PvP questions or ESO questions, feel free to jump in one of my streams. I'll never not answer a question. I may miss it. And if I do, just ask again. Pretty simple, boys and girls. Anyway, I will catch you next time. I hope this helped, and I'll see you